very good place to be up above the ground. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got so I'm gonna show one video here if I can figure out how to get this going.
Volume may not be very loud.
Okay, so this is again out on River Road. This is where the Sylvies River, if it has water in it, runs into the Malheur Lake and crosses the road. And I always take a picture of this because every year it sinks a little bit further into the ground. This homestead had to be abandoned in about 1984 when there was a big flood. Rainier Lake expanded greater than it's ever been in history, I think. And actually, flood came out here and went across the Red Road. And a lot of number of homesteaders got flooded out because of that flood. Anyway, I was out there looking. The main reason I came down in June was to find some baby chicks and get pictures of the baby animals. And so I found these two curlews at the side of the road. And actually, there were 4 curlews. There were 2 together here. There were 2 together in another spot. And they were chirping like crazy. So I figured there had to be some babies. And so I started looking around, and just to the right of them, there was a little chick over here in the corner. And I managed to get a few more pictures. And the thing about Malheur, the best photography you can do is usually from your car, because that's about the only thing the birds see in the way of visitors along the area. So if you stay in your car, it's a pretty good blind, and you can get some pretty good photos, and you won't disturb the birds. And I also found a willet. Actually, when I left this place, I went to another area further away from this, and I found the exact same situation happening again. There were, again, 4 curlews out there chirping like crazy, and there were some birds, some chicks, but I couldn't get very good pictures of the chicks at that particular area. In June, by the time you get to June, the grass is growing, the wheat fields are growing, and because of all the rain, it's a lot harder to find the chicks. And this guy probably may have had some chicks around too, but I had no chance to find them. So we'll take a look at the visitor center. This is a picture taken from above the visitor center, and this is the Blitzen River down here that comes all the way from Steens Mountain and eventually flows into the lake. There's a little bit of water out here, but again, it's not very deep. And this is actually a man-made island here, which was made for Caspian terns. They built this several years ago. It's about 1 acre in size. It's perfectly round. And the idea was to attract Caspian terns from the Columbia River, where they were eating the salmon like a bunch of nasty guys, and to attract them down here to eat the carp that are in the river instead, or in the lake. It was successful in that it attracted Caspian terns here, but they found out they came from California and not our river. And can you admit that? And it worked for a couple of years, and then the lake started drying up, so pretty soon the coyotes could walk out to the lake. And so
Dan,
the
I
last
can't-
couple of years, there haven't been any coyotes
I
there.
can't get it with, you have to hold that still.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got
Or you have to
control
get
of
it.
those.
There we go. No,
Okay,
all right.
sorry. Okay, sorry, we're having too many. We need about 6 people to run this thing. But anyway, so this is again from the top of the hill above the visitor center. This is Marshall Pond. And at one point, I think at the beginning of June, this thing completely dried up. And the deer were grazing in it. And then after Steens Mountain started melting like gangbusters, and the Blitzen River was flowing like crazy. And in one day, this had, I think it was 2 days to fill this up again. So this used to be fed by a natural spring, but it's no longer fed by a spring. It just gets fed by the Blitzen River as it gets high. So, okay, so pictures at the refuge. This is the Bullocks Oriole. You can see it's been snowing around there, but we had some Bullocks Orioles, a male and a female, I think. And we also had a summer tanager. These were rare bird sightings. So this was another unusual bird. It wasn't supposed to be in that area. And this one I actually just discovered last night in my photos. This is, I believe, is a lesser goldfinch, which is a first for me there. So here there's a red-tailed hawk that's been nesting at the refuge for years. And so this is in June 2nd. You can see there's a couple of chicks. There's 3 chicks in the nest. And I got a kind of a sequence here. So this is June 11th, and here the chicks are feeding on a snake. So this is called snake for lunch. And one of them has it first, and then the other one gets it. So we have a tug of war. And now trying to swallow that when you're a bird is kind of a challenge. So this is the movie. Let's see if that works. There we go.
Stop.
Good, the third one's getting in.
This goes on for quite a while. Eventually, the one on the right gets it and swallows it, but it takes quite a while. Okay, so this is June 20th. You can see how fast these chicks grow. So they're out of the nest now, and this guy is flattening his wings exercising. Classic signs of the red-tailed juvenile there with all the large. The question?
Are you in your car while you're filming this?
This is just wandering around the refuge, and these are just shooting up in the trees above the refuge. Yeah, there's lots of birds. The refuge is just an oasis, and the birds get quite familiar with the people and accustomed to them, so it's a great spot to see things.
You mean your visitor center?
Yeah, the visitor center, yeah. So this is a yellow warbler nest that was actually right next to the visitor center. And I got a little video of this. Let's see if I can find this here. This is slow motion because it all happened pretty quick. So one of them is coming in with a bunch of bees or bugs in its mouth and feeding the ones, and the other one's in the nest. And so one's feeding the chicks, and then the other one leaves the nest for a minute. And actually, he gave him about half of the bugs to that one, and he's continuing to feed. Now she comes back. bush they were in in the wind, it would go back and forth like about a foot and a half or 2 feet either way when the wind was blowing. Cleaning time. And you can see that one of the chicks comes up here every now and then, you can barely see her head. Again, there's more video online that you can watch through this. There's a picture, you can barely see the chick's head there. And again, as I said, Marshall Pond filled up, and we had a willet in there and some other birds eventually instead of deer. There's a museum at their headquarters there, and the barn swallow had made a nest right above the door on the light that shines above the entrance there. And we were having trouble. We fill the bird feeders every morning, and but we were having trouble. We had hummingbird feeders, and they kept getting drained every night. We couldn't figure out why. And it turns out the deer were licking the hummingbird feeders dry. And then I found out one day I was by the refuge by myself pretty much, and they were emptying what was left of the bird feeders also. There's great horned owls at the refuge. Almost every year they have a nest and have owlets that are hanging around usually by now. But this year, for some reason, the nest failed. So this is just one of the adults out on a branch enjoying the morning sunshine. So now we're going to take a drive down the Center Patrol Road. So we're going to start from the refuge, and this is just a one-lane road that goes down through the center all the way down here. So we're going to check that out here. So here's me and my Tesla, and I'll just put in a plug for Teslas. They're great birding cars because you can drive along, they don't make any noise. You can stop, you don't have to turn off the ignition because the car isn't jiggling back and forth. You just take your foot off the accelerator and you start taking pictures. But anyway, I want to show you this. The refuge, there's really not a lot of public access to the refuge. There's a road that goes down the west side, and there's a Center Patrol Road, and there's almost no traffic on this. You could be here during the middle of the bird festival, and you probably only see a couple of cars during the whole day. But you just drive down this about 10 miles of an hour, and you see what you can find. So here's the northern harrier. Little magpie. This is actually the best magpie picture I've ever gotten. And you'll see lots of mule deer. There's the Blitzen River. You cross the Blitzen River several times as you go down the Center Patrol Road. It meanders back and forth. And you'll see lots of mule deer, particularly early in the morning or late in the evening. Usually in the northern section, unless it's a really wet year, you won't see a lot of waterfowl in the northern part of the CPR. But after you get down about halfway, you'll start seeing more wildlife. So this is Buena Vista, about halfway down the refuge, and this is an overlook. And this is actually the most water I have ever seen in this pond. So that shows you how much it had been raining and how much the Blitzen River is coming in here now. Because usually you'll see a few. This will be all split up in the little ponds. It'll be full of cattails, and you won't see very much. But this was great this year in Buena Vista. So you can actually drive around Buena Vista and go over to that road was taken. That picture, the last picture, was taken from the main highway, and so you can drive over to the CPR, which goes along the other side of this lake. And so this is kind of on the road that's driving around the lake. And this is another video. You can see this kind of birds are lots of gulls flying around there. There's lots of bacterias flying around. And you'll see that's another duck. You got a creek down there, and never kind of if you. Remember the voice, so I get to read them. Right. I know this. Turn it on. Right. Okay, so some more stuff that's in that lake. I will read. Redhead. Building a nest. Now, these nests must float because this reservoir lake was rising almost every week. You could see it go up a few inches. So these nests, I think, had to float for them to survive, I think. This was a red-winged blackbird gathering nesting materials. You know. There's a sequence merged together in Photoshop.
Same bird.
Ruddy duck. And again, this is just south of the pond. There are again more deer out in the field. And oh yeah, right by the entrance to that pond, there's a barn, and there were three vultures there. And right just south of that where that overlook is, there's a road to Diamond. It turns to the left. And so I turned on that to get back over to the CPR road. And just as I turned, I saw these cranes on the right. I've been waiting all month to get the pictures of our cranes with chicks. And these are the first ones I saw. And unfortunately, they were on the right side of the car. So I had to open the right window. And I'm taking pictures from the driver's seat, trying to hand hold my lens because I would have been arrested on. So they weren't particularly sharp, but at least they got the chicks anyway. And a couple more shots, you can see them here.
Oh, that's nice. See?
And you can still see them there. You can see how high the grass is here right now. So your chances of finding one of these things out in the open is pretty low. But that was the best I did. So now we go to Benson Pond. It's just a little further south from this. And Benson Pond, it's actually an old homestead there. So you can park your car and you can walk across the dike and get out to where there used to be a homestead. And you'll usually find all kinds of wildlife around here. So here we've got a meadowlark taken off. There's lots of these guys singing next to the pond. Marshland. I hate labels on these. Cedar waxwings. These were out fly catching at that day. And there's a pair of great horned owls again that nest there every year. And this is an owlet that I found in the woods there next to the old homestead. Usually there's three of them. This is the only one I could find this year. And they're also, if you get there early in the morning, there are vultures roosting in the trees there overnight. Or actually they come there and roost in the morning. Actually.
That's a beautiful bird.
It's interesting that, they have that V shape, and I understand that's kind of a primitive way of gliding, because what happens, if you have your wings up like this and you start tipping this way, then this lower wing will get more lift, because after it gets in that position, it has more lift. So that pushes it back up this way, and then it'll go this way, and then this leg will get more lift. And so they just have to hold their wings still, and they don't have to do anything, and they just keep gliding like that. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Wait. And a little further down on the CPR road, I'm looking straight ahead, driving along about 10 miles an hour, and I see these willet in front of me down the road. So I just turned the car sideways in the road, so I'm perpendicular to the road, and I started taking pictures of these guys, and they just walked to me. So that, again, it's the best way to film or to take pictures, is just to sit one place, wait for them to come to you. So they came up pretty close to me, and they weren't paying any attention to the car at all. But the mama decided to send the chicks over to the other side of the road, to the right side. And so they all walked over to the right side of the road. And then, he gets them all over there, and then for some reason, they all decide to come back to the other side of the road. So we get them all back over to the left side of the road. And actually, eventually, they actually went right around the car and continued on down. Actually, no, I think they went into the bushes, or into the leaves to the sidewalk. So anyway, as you get further south in the road, you get into more and more grasslands, and they're restoring a lot of the grasslands down there for grasslands like birds. So here I've got a Savannah sparrow and bobolinks. You can find a lot of bobolinks in June down there, just north of the Pea Ranch. And I got a lot of bad pictures, but this one just roosted next to me in a bush. A great fight. Yeah, it's cool. Connection is lost. There, okay. So I got this collage again of a bobolink taken off. And this is the Peter French Ranch. This is a barn from Peter French. If you haven't heard about this, it's pretty interesting. The guy that founded this thing formed what was, by the time he died, the size of his ranch included 45,000 herd of cattle, over 132,000 acres, which translates into 206 square miles. They believe this was the biggest ranch in the West at that time. It was absolutely huge. Peter French came into this area 25 years before this. He was actually murdered by Ed Oliver, and he was kind of a nasty guy for the homesteaders, and he kept trying to buy them out or run them out or whatever he could do. This was the Wild West back then, and everything that you see in the movies happened in this area. But anyway, eventually Ed Oliver shot Peter French in the back, and he was tried in Burns, and he was acquitted for the murder. So I'm not sure what kind of guy he was. But anyway, this is the inside of that. The barn is the only thing that's left standing of the place now. But if you look at a map, so here's the Peter French Ranch. That was one area. They actually had another spot up here that's called the South House Ranch. That was owned by Peter French, who run cattle around there. And out here at Diamond, there's the Brown Barn where he used to keep his horses in the winter, and they would exercise them by running them in circles inside in the barn just to keep them in shape. And so, the ranch, if you think of 200 square miles, it's got 30 miles long and maybe about 7 miles wide would be the average of the size of the ranch. It also extended partway up Steens Mountain and partway down here towards the Caddo Valley, I think. So it's absolutely huge. He was actually a fairly progressive rancher in that at that time, the ranchers would typically, in the fall, they would just let their cattle run free on the range, and they would go round them up in the spring. But Peter French decided with all this water around here from the Woodson River, that he could improve the grazing land by drying out some of the wetlands and irrigating some of the dry lands. And so he started doing that by making ditches and stuff around there. And he would actually progressively, as the snow would melt in the spring, he would bring them higher and higher up in the mountain, and then as it came in the fall, he would bring them further and bring them down. So he got a lot more cattle per acre than most of the other ranches in that area, and that's how he was managed to grow his herd so large. So this was again at the Peter French. There's some trails you can hike on there up the Blitzen River, and I was hiking along there and discovered a little school here I believe that these were California quail young chicks. And I did drive up tried to drive up Steens Mountain. It usually doesn't open because of the snow. They usually don't open the roads until about the middle of August. So this was June, and I could go. I couldn't get up. They had the north road closed, and the south road they only had opened up for 15 miles. It's about a 30-mile loop trip I think you can make. But this is 15 miles in where the road was closed. And this is one of the canyons. So there's like 3 or 4 huge glacier cut canyons on Steens Mountain. If this mountain was any place else other than in this location, it would probably be a national park. And it'd be a lot more facilities there and everything else. But there's almost nothing there. There's a lot of trails. You can hike up these valleys. You can horseback through the area. There's lots of stuff to do, but there's not a lot of facilities there. But it's a gorgeous spot. There's even, I think there are elk in this park, in this area, and there's also Rocky Mountain sheep around here. I've never seen them, but they're apparently in the area.
Wild horses.
Yeah, there's a lot of wild horses. Another place I went to was this place called the Lippman Lake, which is actually north of the refuge. Here's the refuge, here's the town of Burns, and you can drive, so this is 78 miles from the refuge, so it's about 30 miles here, it's about 40 miles this way. I'd never been there before, but one of the other volunteers went there and saw a lot of new stuff. It's kind of up in the mountains. So on Google Maps, it looks like it's pretty good. It's a 55-mile-an-hour road up until about here, and the 2-lane road, and then it turns into a one-lane road with turnouts. And so this is like driving back in time. It felt like I was driving on this road that was probably made in the 30s or 40s or something like that. But it's one lane for like 30 miles here. And with these turnouts, and it's windy road, really going up and over curves and everything. And I don't think I saw another car until I actually got out here. And there's a campground. There were lots of campers here camping. And this lake, there's a trail around the lake. It's about a mile around. I went around and then I went back around the other way. And lots of interesting, different kinds of wildlife there. Chipping sparrow, western tanager. Nice. Mountain bluebird. And a western bluebird. And a spotted sandpiper. So it's really interesting, like quite a different area. Another opportunity I had is there are snowy plovers that nest on some of these semi-alkaline lakes around the area. So they were doing a survey of the snowy plovers, and they invited me to come along and see if I could get some photos of them. So if you look at this is what the route looks like on Google Maps, okay? This is the Double O Ranch, and the road is closed to the public right about here, I think. The Double O Ranch is sometimes open during like the festival and things like that, but a lot of the times it's closed. We drove 2 trucks out here to the Double O Ranch, one of which we pulled kind of like an all-terrain vehicle, sort of for emergencies in case we had to get bailed out. These gals do these surveys on their own, and they don't want to have troubles and have to walk or call for help when they're this far away from the refuge. So we left that vehicle here, and then we drove one of the pickup trucks on this road. Well, it looks like a nice road there from Google Maps, and this is what it looks like from the car. So this is just a dried up bud flat here. And we're driving across that, and then we're driving across sagebrush. And then we finally get there, and this is the end of the road. And this is the lake that we're going to go around here. So this is what the gals did. This is Teresa Wicks, who is she's the first time full-time paid representative for Portland Audubon, and she actually lives and works on the refuge full time. And this is the first time they've ever had one of these people. And I think this is about her third year, doing that. Her handle is Bird. She's called Bird by everybody. And this is, Alexia, who is the, Fish and Wildlife, person that's actually doing the survey, the stoop surveys, and this is one of the volunteers that's with him. And it was fortunately, this is the middle of June, and it was fairly cool that morning. It was overcast and there was a breeze, and hopefully it wasn't gonna be too hot out on this alkaline lake. And, we get to the lake, and it's interesting, because I eventually got up in the high 80s. And these gals didn't realize they still had their down vest on until about 11 o'clock, when I was shed pretty much. And we're doing a 10-mile hike around this lake. And there's no shade, so it was kind of interesting. So this is what it looks like. Most of these lakes, even Malheur is an alkaline lake. It's moderately salty. But there's a lot of birds that are attracted to these places. And so here's one of the best pictures I got of the snowy plovers. And it always amazes me, these birds will just scrape a hole in the sand and have a nest. And this is a chick and this is the adult. And one of the reasons they're so attractive is this pile here of what are called brine flies. And these brine flies are very common to alkaline lake, and they're a terrific source of protein. And they're just sitting there in the sand waiting to be plucked. And so this is what makes these lakes so attractive. There's a couple more pictures of the chicks. I was hand holding my 600 millimeter lens with a 1.4 extender on it. So I was having a hard time getting good full sharp pictures, but I got a couple here. And this is a couple of adults again. And all these little black spots you see are brine flies. And see the way they blend in. It's just amazing. You know, you have a hard time finding it if you really weren't looking for them. And at this point, we've gone about 3/4 of the way around the lake. We started way over here. We've gone around the other side. And we're up on a cliff above the only inlet into the lake, which is a freshwater inlet. And this is the last picture I took, a little dust storm coming up here. What's interesting about these brine flies, they thrive in these alkaline lakes on these things. And it turns out that there are 3 main alkaline lakes in the Western Hemisphere. And the Great Salt Lake is one of them. Mono Lake is another one, and this turns out to be a third one. And I'd never heard about this until a couple of weeks ago. But this is actually, it's the only hypersaline lake in Oregon, and one of 3, which are the Mono and the Great Salt Lake. But this is one of the few lakes that's anything like this Great Salt Lake. And they did a presentation, the Oregon National Native Desert Association did a presentation just a couple of weeks ago about the birds of Lake Elbert, and it's really interesting. I put it on the website, so you can find it under our blog on the website and watch it, but it gives you a lot of good information about this lake. And I wanted to show you something more about brine flies. Several years ago, Jay and I went to the Great Salt Lake because there was an Audubon conference there. And we went to Antelope Island, which is on the Great Salt Lake. There's a causeway that goes up to Antelope Island, and it's full of brine flies. So I'll show you a few quick photos about how they eat brine flies. So these are phalaropes. And the birds get attracted to the lakes by the houses in the summertime. There's just rafts of birds out here. There's rafts of avocets and reeds and phalaropes. Normally these guys are trying to stir up the mud to get the bugs, but what they're doing here is these brine flies, when they're born, they create a little bubble that mixes with the surface, and they pop out of the surface where they just all of the surface, and they're just grabbing them to eat them. Numbers of 370 million per mile along the shoreline. When you walk along the shoreline, it's just a cloud of bugs that's about 1.5 feet high. Fortunately, they don't bite.
If you go there, you will make an eating sign.
So there's just hundreds of these photographs dogs that are just dragging them out of the earth. This is the ground here, it's funny, but it's- here it is, water. You open your mouth and run.
It's a once a year cycle, should term.
Well, the brine flies and brine shrimp are all hatching during the summertime. And so birds come to the Salt Lake from all over the Western Hemisphere, or the Western United States. In particular, I'll tell you a little bit more about the eared grebe. They think that virtually 90% or more of the eared grebes in Western America go either to the Salt Lake or to Final Lake in the summertime. And they actually lose their flight feathers, and they gorge themselves on brine shrimp, and they just get huge. They double their weight or more, and they just gorge themselves on this. And then eventually, later on, towards the fall, they regrow their flight feathers. Their whole intestines actually change. Their intestines enlarge, and their muscles, they deteriorate. And then in the fall, it changes, and their intestines shrink, and they gain back their flight muscles and their feathers, and they fly away. And I'll show you a little bit more here about this. It's just an amazing evolution. Get this to you. Here, here, okay, so here's the thing about the Great Salt Lake. So, almost the entire population of ear grebes fly to Malheur Lake, California, or the Great Salt Lake, but that no. They more than double their weight and size, and their muscles and organs change, and and so on. And then before departure in the winter months, the process reverses. And they say this cycle actually repeats in the fall three to six times, so that perhaps for 9 to 10 months of the year, this species is flightless. And this is the longest flightless period of any bird, like this. It's an amazing evolution when you think about it. Now the problem with this, of course, is these lakes are all drying up. The Great Salt Lake is shrinking dramatically, and if these birds get caught in a lake that dries up and they can't fly, they're gonna perish. Lake Albert, they've been studying the bird surveys. If you watch that video, they've studied in particularly the eared grebes, and in a dry year, when that lake starts drying up, the eared grebes will not come there at all. They're smart enough to know they're not going to make it if that happens. But this is a dramatic, change, because these birds have evolved for this cycle, and so who knows what's going to happen. So anyway, getting on. One of the main reasons I wanted to go here in June is to get pictures of the chicks of the burrowing owls, and I spent days riding around in areas where I knew there were nests, and I would find one or two owls there, and they were adults, and they were just sitting there twisting their head around and not doing anything. And I got gorgeous pictures of them, but I couldn't find any chicks. Until finally, the gal who's the wildlife, biologist, she heard I was looking for them. She said, well, I drive by them every morning on my way to work here from town. And they're right out there and I was laying right next to the highway. You see them every morning. So I went out there that night about 8 o'clock, because I knew it'd be a nice sunset, lighting would be nice, and there they were, all just standing there next to the road. Now, unfortunately, it's not a very good place to take pictures of, because the road is up on a raised bed because of the floods. And the most you can do is pull your car about, your right wheels off of the highway, and there's people driving by at 65, 30 miles an hour. Fortunately, at 8 o'clock at night, there's not much traffic, so I was able to pretty well stop there and get some pictures, but anyway, so. Yeah, here's, there, okay, so I got a little movie here right there. So there, you can see there's 5 chicks there and a mom. And there's one more that's closer out here, closer to the road, and there's 2 more that are somewhere else hidden in the bush, in the brush. So she's got 8 of them. Feed me. Maybe she has enough of it. But she flew off and landed on a bush a little ways away and kept her eye on me. But I drove all over the place. Those are the best pictures I ever got in the early hours. So one of the last things I wanted to show you, there's a ferruginous hawk nest that's been there ever since I've been going to the refuge. It must be, at least it's over a decade, it's over 15 years old, I know, maybe longer than that. But it's huge, and it's right next to the main highway there, on private land. And I've been photographing it for quite a while. This was taken in 2018. That's I'm over the chicks in there. I want you to notice how high the nest is in this picture, 2018. You can kind of see who these twigs are. If you look at it in the next picture, well, no, this is the same period, same time period. There's also a western kingbird that actually nests in the same tree, which is a sort of a great example of limited habitat. This is like the only tree in 10 miles away, and it's the only fruit hawk nest I know of in that area. But they nest here and they dive bomb the hawks, but they get along. But you can see, I think, here she's bringing in a mouse head that looks like, or gopher head. And anyway, you can see how big the nest. Now this is this year. You can see the nest is growing like a foot, at least in there. And so she's got the chicks here in June. And it's kind of hard, it's quite a ways away, but anyway, I was coming home from town one evening, and they were out there, and the wind was blowing like crazy. And they were trying to go to leave a short flying there. It was swollen, the wind was blind, when they took off, they're just gonna be rolling around this nest. But never, what they're doing. It's interesting, because in April, these chicks are all away. And now they've got this orange patch on their chest. And I thought the first time I saw them, I thought these supposed to be swaying. They were swaying off, it's teenagers the same neck. No, they're the same chicks. You just turn into this foundation or something. By June. So that's what that's the last picture I took of the nest. You can see it's really gotten a lot bigger over the time period. Unfortunately, this spring, the whole tree collapsed. The nest got too big and it fell down. So I don't know whether they're gonna try to rebuild or what will happen this year. If you're interested in learning more about the area, a couple of interesting books that have come out in the last year or so. This one in particular I love. William Finley is probably the guy that's most responsible for saving Malheur, making it a refuge. He came out here in 1908 and took pictures of the birds with a big box camera. And it must have been a real adventure to come out here. This is a terrific book. He's got incredible pictures of birds. He's got them sitting on them. He's got them. He was just amazing photographer. So that's a really interesting bird. He took pictures of the egret. There was an island where the white egrets, were they called white herons at that time, would roost on, and the plume hunters came out there and in like 1 or 2 nights exterminated every adult bird in the colony. And he photographed that and took pictures to Teddy Roosevelt, and Teddy Roosevelt ended up finding this a bird sanctuary, and he kept at it, and eventually Franklin Roosevelt came out here on his tour around America. And Teddy Roosevelt took him out there, and Teddy Roosevelt expanded it and made it a bigger refuge and so on. So Finley was really important in here. He eventually became a game warden for the state of Oregon, and he became one of the first presidents of Portland Audubon, and so on. Really quite a character. This book talks a lot about basically what happened in the West between everybody draining the riparian areas and try to, do things better than nature could, to improve the agriculture and so on. And she uses Lake or Malheur Refuge as kind of a model for his story about what happened here. And it's really amazing. She talks about when the French trappers came here to trap the beaver. There were, if you drove along the Blitzen River, there were like 30 beaver dams per mile on that river. And the Hudson Bay Company at that time was worried that America was going to annex this the Oregon colony or territory, and so he hired Ogden to exterminate the beavers in Oregon, which he literally did. He exterminated virtually every beaver in Oregon, and so that changed the whole drainage system of the refuge. And I think that may have been one of the main reasons that by 1980, the whole Blitzen River had been channelized, and major changes to this thing. So when they had a series of really wet years and big snowpacks, a series of several of them in the road, that water flowed from Steens Mountain into the lake and expanded the lake like gangbusters. And that ended up changing the whole nature of the lake, because what happened during the winters, the lake would freeze over and then it would expand and contract, and it just scalped the whole bottom of the lake. It used to be basically like I just want to mention this. This is another presentation about the Malheur Refuge that's done by Bob Selinger, who's the conservation director of Portland Audubon. And this is a really good video, which is also on our website, about the history of the area. So I'd recommend that. And there's more history on the Friends of Malheur Refuge. But I wanted to show you this. This is what it looked like in 1908. This is what Malheur Lake looked like. There was just these bunch of floating cattail islands. And those are all gone now. It's all an open lake now, and it's full of carp. And the carp keep the bottom stirred up, so the light can't penetrate more than 8 inches into the lake. And the number of the duck population and bird population is like 1/10 of what it was before this happened. So the whole focus of the refuge is trying to get the carp out of this lake and restore, for ducks. That's their main conservation goal right now, and it's almost an impossible task. The carp average about 500 pounds per acre. And it's just, when the lake dries up, they bury themselves in the lake, in the bottom of the lake, and when it fills up again, they come out and alive again. They try to exterminate them, they try, major problem. But, yeah. And I want to mention that other book, let me get back to it. This book is about the Bundys, and when they tried to come over to take over the refuge a few years ago. And what's interesting about that is that the ranchers and the cattlemen and the conservationists have been working for several years. They come together with an agreement of how things work. And everybody got kind of what they wanted. They all didn't do everything they wanted. But the cattlemen, for example, they got 30-year grazing permits. So they've got kind of a guaranteed future and things like that. They've got a working agreement with the refuge about how things work. And they all know that they're better off with this agreement than without it. And so when the Bundys asked these guys to sign this agreement, where they said that refuge would turn over the land to the original owners, they couldn't get a single rancher in an area to sign the agreement. And so they picked the wrong place to go to, basically. But it's an interesting story. And the book that Peter Salinger's book talks about a lot about that too, because he was involved in getting that agreement to happen. So really interesting questions. Presentation, yeah. So that's the end of the presentation. Questions from anybody in the chat? Any questions in the chat box? Any questions from the audience?
Then you stay at the refuge. I know you mentioned they had like RV parks. Are there any ordinary campgrounds in that area?
Yeah, there's at the junction of Sodhouse Lane and the French Land Highway. There's a big campground there, RV park there. There's also the field station, which is even closer to the refuge. And you can, they have an RV park there that you can stay also. And they even have a cafeteria, you can buy meals and stuff there. And there's some campgrounds in town also.
And the south end, there's a campground.
Right, at the very south end, there's Page Springs Campground, which is near the P Ranch. And it's a great place to camp. It's actually fantastic for birding.
Yeah.
The first time I camped there was a northern flicker that had a nest in a tree right next to you. It was about 3 feet off the ground. He had a hole in that tree. And it's a great place for yellow-breasted chats and everything. Yeah, it's just a terrific place. There's a few trails you can hike on there too. It's a great place.
And then there's the hotel.
Yeah, there's a whole French Land Hotel, which is a historic monument, actually. You can have the biggest and best dinner you can imagine right there every night. So, yeah. Other questions? Anything in the chat? Okay, well, I thank you all for coming.
This is it, Phil. Anyone got nothing to do in April, you could go down and hear the same talk at the Bird Festival.
No, this is a different talk.
Oh, a different?
Yeah, it's how to bird Malheurs at the Bird Festival.
Oh, okay. It's a different talk. Any comments? Well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully the winds will blow you home safely. And see you next month.
Oh, that was good. Thank you, Dan.